The men who built the Great Pyramid were paid in beer. This isn't a modern fantasy. It is the simple truth, written in ancient records and confirmed by archaeology. The story we all know of countless slaves dying under the whip is a powerful myth, but the reality is far more fascinating. It is a story of a temporary city of nearly 20,000 skilled craftsmen. They were organized into competing gangs, and they were compensated for their work. They received shelter, medical care, and a daily wage of bread and beer, more than 10 pints of beer, every single day. So tonight, forget the grim tale of oppression. Imagine instead a story of incredible purpose. This is the story of a stonemason, a man who leaves his home not in chains, but with the promise of a prestigious contract. He feels not the sting of a lash, but the deep pride of his guild as they work together to build an eternal monument. This is a story of human ingenuity and of an astonishing collective will. Tonight, let's step into that world. Let us trade the myth for the truth and join the workers who built a stairway to the stars. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe. This is a place for calming history stories, tales designed to help you unwind and to gently fall asleep. First, let the world around you soften. Find a comfortable position and allow your breathing to become slow and steady. Imagine a gentle breeze carrying the scent of dust and river water. In the distance, you can hear the soft lapping of the Nile against its reedy banks. We are in a small village, far from the capital. Life here is peaceful and ordered by the sun and the seasons. It is a life that is about to change forever. Let us join a man named Nakao in his dusty workshop. He is here on a day that begins like any other, but will end with a summons from a god. The sun beats down on Nakao's small workshop. Its light illuminates a million dancing particles of limestone dust. Nakao is a master stonemason, and his skill is known throughout his village. His hands, calloused and strong, move with a quiet confidence. He carves a line of hieroglyphs into a small stela for a neighbor. The work is familiar, the rhythm of his mallet a steady and comforting sound. This is his life. Simple, honorable, and predictable. But today, that predictability is broken. A shadow falls across the doorway. Nakao looks up, shielding his eyes from the glare. A man stands there, a stranger. He is a royal scribe, his clean linen robe and papyrus case marking him as a man of importance. He is a man from the capital, from a world away. The village children, who had been playing in the lane, fall silent. They watch with wide, curious eyes. The scribe enters, his gaze sweeping over Nakao's work. He nods, a flicker of approval in his eyes. He unrolls a papyrus scroll, its surface covered in the elegant cursive script of the state. He begins to read. It is an official summons. The pharaoh, Khufu, is building his eternal monument. It will be called Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, the greatest building the world has ever known. This is not a command enforced by a sword. It is an offer. It is a prestigious contract, a call to national service. For his skill, Nakao will be compensated. He will be given a place in the workers' city, with shelter and clothing. He will receive daily rations of bread, fish, and most importantly, beer. It is a form of tax, yes, but a tax paid in skill, not in gold. His labor for the glory of the pharaoh and the stability of the entire kingdom. Nakao listens, his heart pounding in his chest. The familiar sounds of his workshop seem to fade away. Before him lies a choice. He can stay here in his peaceful village, living the life he has always known. Or he can answer the call. He can become a part of something immense, something eternal. He looks at his tools, then at the scribe. A quiet pride swells within him. His decision is made. The journey begins on the river. The Nile. In the language of the people, it is simply Idaru, the river. It is the vein of the kingdom, the lifeblood of Egypt. Nekau sits aboard a simple wooden vessel, its single sail full of the north wind. He has said his farewells, a difficult and quiet affair. He promised to return, though he knew this work could take many years. Now, his small village is far behind him, lost in the hazy distance. The boat is surrounded by the immense, vibrant life of the river. Other boats glide past them. There are heavy barges, low in the water, laden with grain and cattle. There are transport ships, crowded with men just like him. All of them are drawn from their homes across the land. They are carpenters and quarrymen and masons. All are heading north, towards the capital, towards the great project. Days turn into weeks. The sun rises and sets, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The rhythm of the journey becomes its own kind of life. Nekau watches the landscape change. Green, fertile fields give way to stretches of stark desert sand. He sees crocodiles basking on the muddy banks and flocks of ibis taking flight. It is a world so much larger than he ever imagined. And then he sees it. At first, it is just a tiny triangle on the horizon, a faint shape shimmering in the heat. It seems impossibly small. But with each passing day, with every mile the boat travels, it grows. The small triangle resolves into a more definite shape, and it is joined by others, the smaller pyramids of Khufu's father and grandfather. But his pyramid, the new one, dwarfs them all. It rises from the Giza Plateau like a man-made mountain. Even from this distance, its scale is breathtaking. It seems to pierce the very sky. The awe is a physical thing, a weight in his chest. What kind of power could raise such a thing from the earth? The boat finally docks at a bustling harbor. The noise is overwhelming, a stark contrast to the quiet of his village. The air is thick with 100 new smells. There is the scent of wood smoke, baking bread, and the sweat of thousands of working men. Shouts and commands echo in a dozen different dialects. Scribes with clay tablets move through the crowds, their voices sharp and clear. This is the port that serves the pyramid. Nekau steps onto the land, his legs unsteady after weeks on the water. He has arrived. He is guided with a group of other new arrivals through a gateway in a long, imposing wall. This, a scribe tells them, is Height El Garab. In our language, it means the wall of the crow. For centuries, this place was lost to the sand, a secret buried in the desert. But archaeologists have uncovered it, and it has told them a stunning story. This is not a slave camp. It is a city. A meticulously planned and highly organized city of builders. As Nekau walks through the crowded streets, he sees long, gallery-style buildings stretching out in neat rows. These are the barracks, designed to house thousands of workers at a time. They are not prisons. They are temporary homes for the rotating crews who come to serve their time on the project. There are separate districts for the permanent, skilled artisans like himself. He sees workshops filled with the clang of copper hammers. He sees administrative buildings where scribes track every block of stone and every loaf of bread. And he sees the source of that bread, massive bakeries, with rows of large clay pots used to produce thousands of loaves a day. The entire city is a marvel of logistics, a machine built to serve the even greater machine rising on the plateau above. Archaeologists have studied the bones discarded in this city. They were not eating scraps. They were eating prime cuts of beef and mutton and goat. They were well fed and well cared for. They were valued. Nakao is guided through the organized chaos, his senses reeling from the sheer scale of it all. He is brought before another scribe, seated at a simple wooden table. The scribe asks him his name, his village, and his trade. Nakao's answers are recorded with swift, confident strokes onto a piece of pottery. He is no longer just Nakao, the mason from a distant village. He is now a number, a name on a list, a part of the great inventory of labor. But he is also given something else. He is given a new family. After being processed, he is assigned to his guild. This is his crew for the duration of the project, the men he will work with, eat with, and live with. He is led to one of the long barracks, a place that will be his home for years to come. The first part of his journey is over. The apprehension of the unknown is slowly being replaced by something else, a sense of belonging and of immense shared purpose. This was the genius of the Giza administration. The workforce was not an unruly mob. It was a carefully organized society. The thousands of men were divided into large crews of about 2,000 men each. These crews were then broken down into smaller units. Nakao finds himself assigned to a za, a division of 200 men. And within that, he joins as aper, a gang of about 20 men. These gangs were the true heart of the project. They were the families, the teams that worked together day in and day out. And they had names. They had identities. We know this because they left their mark, quite literally. Deep inside the Great Pyramid, in hidden chambers above the king's chamber, there is graffiti. It was painted there by the workers 4,500 years ago. These markings name the gangs with names like the Friends of Khufu or even the Drunkards of Menkaure. This structure was designed to foster competition and camaraderie. Each gang would take pride in their work, trying to outperform the others. It was a system built on teamwork, not terror. A clear hierarchy kept everything moving. At the very top was the vizier, the architect of the entire project. His name was Hemunu. Below him were the overseers of the works, then the scribes who managed the logistics. And finally, there were the gang leaders and the workers themselves. Each man knew his place in the great human machine. As you settle in for the night, imagine Nakao finding his bunk in these long halls. He lays down on his simple mat. Around him are the sounds of hundreds of sleeping men. Their quiet breathing fills the vast space. They are from all corners of the kingdom, but here they are one. All of them are ready for the great work, which will begin at dawn. The day begins before the sun. A low murmur spreads through the barracks as thousands of men stir from their sleep. There are no trumpets, no harsh bells. There is only the quiet, shared understanding that the work awaits. Nakao rises with his new gang. They move together, a river of men flowing out into the cool pre-dawn air. Their first destination is the source of their energy, the bakeries and breweries. Here, the scale of the operation is truly revealed. The air is warm and thick with the smell of yeast and baking bread. Dozens of men work around huge, bell-shaped pots called bedja. These were the ovens, capable of mass-producing enormous quantities of bread. This is not a simple meal. It is fuel, nutrient-rich and calorie-dense, designed to power thousands of men through a day of hard labor. And then there is the beer. The Egyptian beer, or henket, was not like the beer we know today. It was thick and cloudy, more like a nourishing porridge than a drink. It was a vital source of calories and vitamins. And crucially, the brewing process made it safer to drink than water from the canals, which could be contaminated. It was their hydration, their nutrition, and their payment, all in one. Nakau and his crewmates are given their rations for the day. Each man receives multiple loaves of fresh bread and a large jug of beer. It amounts to more than 4 liters, a generous and necessary wage. This was the standard for a laborer. The foremen and officials, of course, received more. Their rations included finer foods and better cuts of meat. The hierarchy was present in every aspect of life, even at breakfast. With their energy for the day secured, the gangs move out from the city. They head towards the 2 sources of their material, the sprawling quarries and the rising pyramid itself. Before the first stone can be moved, a craftsman must know his tools. For Nekatu, these are extensions of his own hands. They are simple but effective. They are the instruments that will shape a mountain. Let us pause and feel the weight of these tools and understand the skill they required. The primary tool for shaping stone is not made of metal. It is another stone. Nekau's main implement is a dolerite pounder. It is a ball of hard, dark igneous rock, heavy in the hand. For hours on end, he and his team will use these pounders to rough out the shape of a block, chipping away at the limestone. The work is hard and monotonous, but it is the first crucial step. For more detailed work, there is copper. Copper was the primary metal of this age. Nekau has a collection of copper chisels and copper saws, but copper is a soft metal. It dulls quickly against the hard stone. This meant an army of smiths worked on site, in their own workshops, constantly resharpening the thousands of tools needed each day. The copper saws were not used alone. To cut through a block of limestone, the workers would use the saw in combination with an abrasive. They would pour a slurry of fine sand into the cut. The sand, which is made of quartz, is much harder than the copper. It was the sand that did the cutting, not the saw itself. The saw was just a tool to drive the abrasive back and forth, a slow and patient process. And then there are the tools of precision. The work on the pyramid had to be almost perfect. To achieve this, Nekau would use simple but ingenious devices. He had a plumb bob, a small weight on a string, to ensure every wall was perfectly vertical. He had a wooden square level to check for right angles. To level the massive foundation of the pyramid, an area covering 13 acres, the builders used an even cleverer trick. They cut a grid of trenches into the bedrock and filled them with water. The water created a perfectly level surface, which they used as a reference to level the entire base. Every measurement was based on a standard unit. This was the Egyptian royal cubit, a length of about 52 centimeters, or 20 inches. It was the length of the pharaoh's forearm, from his elbow to the tip of his middle finger. This single, consistent unit of measurement ensured that every block, cut by hundreds of different men, would fit together perfectly. These were the tools of eternity. Simple, powerful, and in the hands of a master like Nekau, capable of creating perfection. Now that we understand the tools, we can follow them to where they were put to the ultimate test. We join Nakao and his gang in the Great Limestone Quarry, just south of the pyramid itself. This is where most of the pyramid's 2.3 million blocks were born. The air is white with dust, and the chorus of thousands of stone pounders echoes off the rock walls. It is a scene of immense, organized labor. Nakao's team is assigned to a section of the quarry face. Their task is to free a single block of stone. It will weigh about 2.5 tons, the weight of a large car. First, they use their dolerite pounders to hammer out deep channels into the bedrock. They work on the top and down the sides of the block they want to create. This is grueling, repetitive work. It takes hours of relentless pounding under the hot Egyptian sun. Once the channels are deep enough, the next stage begins. The workers carefully cut smaller slots along the bottom line of the block. Into these slots, they hammer wooden wedges. This is the moment of magic and of ancient ingenuity. Other workers arrive with jugs of water. They pour the water onto the wooden wedges, soaking them completely. The wood begins to swell and expand. It exerts a slow but irresistible pressure against the stone. The gang stands back, waiting. They listen. After some time, a deep groaning sound comes from the rock. Then, with a great crack, the multi-ton block splits from the bedrock. A new piece of the pyramid has been freed. But not all the stone was from here. For the pyramid's outer skin, a special stone was needed. A pure, white limestone from a place called Tura, on the other side of the Nile. This Tura limestone was prized for its beauty. It would form the smooth, gleaming casing of the pyramid, allowing it to shine like a jewel in the sun. And for the heart of the pyramid, an even stronger stone was required. Deep within the structure, in the king's chamber, the architects needed to span a wide ceiling. To do this, they used massive beams of granite. This granite could only be found in one place, at Aswan, more than 800 kilometers to the south. Some of these granite blocks weighed up to 80 tons. Getting them here was a Herculean task. They were quarried with the same painstaking methods, and then loaded onto enormous wooden barges. These barges could only make the journey during the annual flood of the Nile, when the water was high enough to carry their immense weight. It was a battle of human will against the very geology of the earth. Once a block is freed from the quarry, the next great challenge begins. It must be moved. It must be transported from the quarry to its final place on the rising structure. This is where the myth of the whip is strongest. But the reality, once again, is a story of coordination, not coercion. We can imagine Nekao's gang, their first task done, joining another team. Their new job is to haul a massive block on a wooden sledge. There is a famous drawing from the tomb of an official named Jiutetip. It shows a colossal statue being pulled by 172 men. They are arranged in 4 neat rows, hauling on thick ropes. They are not being whipped. They are working together as a single unit. In front of the sledge, a man pours a liquid onto the sand. For years, people debated what he was doing. Now we believe he was pouring water. Just the right amount of water on the sand can reduce friction by half. It makes the impossible possible. We can hear them now. A foreman chants a rhythm, a simple song to coordinate the effort. And the men chant back, heaving on the ropes in unison. A, ah, dot, fe. The sound echoes across the plateau. It is the sound of teamwork, the sound of shared effort. This is how you move a mountain, one block at a time. Of course, the greatest mystery of all is how they moved these blocks upwards. How did they get them to the top of the pyramid? The truth is, no one knows for sure. The Egyptians left us no records of their method, but we can look at the evidence and explore the most likely ideas. For a long time, people believed in a single long ramp, a straight ramp stretching from the quarry to the top of the pyramid. But this theory has a problem. To reach the top of the Great Pyramid at a gentle slope, the ramp would have to be over a mile long. It would have been a bigger construction project than the pyramid itself. It simply doesn't seem practical. A more plausible theory suggests a different kind of ramp. Perhaps a spiral ramp that corkscrewed around the outside of the pyramid as it grew. This would require far less material. It would hug the pyramid's sides, rising with each new level. This is a much better possibility. Many Egyptologists today believe some version of this theory is correct. But in recent years, a new, compelling idea has emerged. Proposed by a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin, it suggests the main ramp was internal. He argues that after the lower third of the pyramid was built with a short, straight external ramp, the workers then built a ramp inside the pyramid itself. It would have spiraled upwards, just a few feet from the outer edge. This would explain why we have found no evidence of a large external ramp. It would be an elegant and hidden solution. Whichever method they used, it was incredibly dangerous work. The teams hauling the sledges had to be perfectly coordinated. A slipped rope or a cracked sledge could send a multi-ton block sliding backwards. Such an accident would be instantly fatal for anyone in its path. The men worked with intense focus, their lives depending on their trust in one another. The day's hard labor is finally done. The sun begins to sink towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the plateau. The foremen call an end to the work. The rhythmic chanting fades, replaced by the weary chatter of tired men. The crews retreat from the quarries and the ramps. They leave the stones they have moved, ready to be set into place by other specialized teams. Their part in the rhythm of creation is complete for now. They walk back towards the light and noise of their city, Height El Garab, ready for food, rest, and the community of their gangs. Now, we follow Nikau and his gang into the great limestone quarry, just south of the pyramid itself. This is where most of the pyramid's 2.3 million blocks were born. The air is white with dust. The chorus of thousands of stone pounders echoes off the rock walls. It is a scene of immense and organized labor. Nikau's team is assigned to a section of the quarry face. Their task is to free a single block of stone. It will weigh about 2.5 tons, the weight of a modern car. First, they use their dolerite pounders to hammer out deep channels into the bedrock. They work on the top and down the sides of the block they want to create. This is grueling, repetitive work. It takes hours of relentless pounding under the hot Egyptian sun. Once the channels are deep enough, the next stage begins. The workers carefully cut smaller slots along the bottom line of the block. Into these slots, they hammer hard wooden wedges. This is the moment of magic and of ancient ingenuity. Other workers arrive with jugs of water. They pour the water onto the wooden wedges, soaking them completely. The wood begins to swell and expand. It exerts a slow but irresistible pressure against the stone. The gang stands back, waiting. They listen. After some time, A deep groaning sound comes from the rock. Then, with a great crack, the multi-ton block splits from the bedrock. A new piece of the pyramid has been freed. But not all the stone was from here. For the pyramid's outer skin, a special stone was needed. A pure, white limestone from a place called Tura, on the other side of the Nile. This Tura limestone was prized for its beauty. It would form the smooth, gleaming casing of the pyramid, allowing it to shine like a jewel in the sun. And for the heart of the pyramid, an even stronger stone was required. Deep within the structure, in the king's chamber, the architects needed to span a wide ceiling. To do this, they used massive beams of granite. This granite could only be found in one place, at Aswan, more than 800 kilometers to the south. Some of these granite blocks weighed up to 80 tons. Getting them here was a Herculean task. They were quarried with the same painstaking methods. They were then loaded onto enormous wooden barges. These barges could only make the journey during the annual flood of the Nile, when the water was high enough to carry their immense weight. It was a battle of human will against the very geology of the earth. Once a block is freed from the quarry, the next great challenge begins. It must be moved. It must be transported from the quarry to its final place on the rising structure. This is where the myth of the whip is strongest. But the reality, once again, is a story of coordination, not coercion. We can imagine Nako's gang, their first task done, joining another team. Their new job is to haul a massive block on a wooden sledge. There is a famous drawing from the tomb of an official named Jotutip. It shows a colossal statue being pulled by 172 men. They are arranged in 4 neat rows, hauling on thick ropes. They are not being whipped. They are working together as a single unit. In front of the sledge, a man pours a liquid onto the sand. For years, people debated what he was doing. Now we believe he was pouring water. Just the right amount of water on the sand can reduce friction by half. It makes the impossible possible. We can hear them now. A foreman chants a rhythm, a simple song to coordinate the effort. And the men chant back, heaving on the ropes in unison. The sound echoes across the plateau. It is the sound of teamwork, the sound of shared effort. This is how you move a mountain, one block at a time. Of course, the greatest mystery of all is how they move these blocks upwards. How did they get them to the top of the pyramid? The truth is, no one knows for sure. The Egyptians left us no records of their method, but we can look at the evidence and explore the most likely ideas. For a long time, people believed in a single long ramp, a straight ramp stretching from the quarry to the top of the pyramid. But this theory has a problem. To reach the top of the Great Pyramid at a gentle slope, the ramp would have to be over a mile long. It would have been a bigger construction project than the pyramid itself. It simply doesn't seem practical. A more plausible theory suggests a different kind of ramp. Perhaps a spiral ramp that corkscrewed around the outside of the pyramid as it grew. This would require far less material. It would hug the pyramid's sides, rising with each new level. This is a much better possibility. But in recent years, a new compelling idea has emerged. Proposed by a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin, it suggests the main ramp was internal. He argues that after the lower third of the pyramid was built with a short, external ramp, the workers then built a ramp inside the pyramid itself. It would have spiraled upwards just a few feet from the outer edge. This would explain why we have found no evidence of a large external ramp. An elegant and hidden solution. Whichever method they used, it was incredibly dangerous work. The teams hauling the sledges had to be perfectly coordinated. A slipped rope or a cracked sledge could send a multi-ton block sliding backwards. Such an accident would be instantly fatal for anyone in its path. The men worked with intense focus, their lives depending on their trust in one another. The day's hard labor is finally done. The sun sinks towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the plateau. The rhythmic chanting fades, replaced by the weary chatter of tired men. They retreat from the quarries and the ramps, their part in the rhythm of creation complete, for now. The physical work was only one part of this world. To truly understand the people who built the pyramids, we must look beyond the stones. We must explore their culture, their beliefs, and the social fabric of their incredible city. We must see how they cared for each other, what they did in their downtime, and why they dedicated their lives to this project. This was more than a job. It was a life of purpose. The work site at Giza was an incredibly dangerous place. With thousands of men and multi-ton blocks of stone constantly in motion, accidents were frequent. A moment of distraction could lead to a crushed hand, a broken leg, or worse. In a world built on slavery, these injured men would have been disposable. They would have been left to die, but at Giza, they were not. They were cared for. Let us imagine a man from Noku's gang. He stumbles on the ramp, and a heavy stone shifts, fracturing his arm. The pain is immense, but he is not abandoned. His crewmates carefully carry him away from the worksite. They take him to a special part of the city, to the infirmary. This was the house of life. Here, skilled doctors, known as swing, would tend to his wounds. The evidence for their skill is written in the bones of the workers themselves. The cemetery for the pyramid builders has been found, and the skeletons buried there tell a remarkable story. Archaeologists have found many healed fractures, set with a precision that is startling. They have found evidence of amputations, where the patient survived long after the procedure. They have even found skulls with signs of successful brain surgery. These ancient doctors worked with a surprising degree of rationality. We know this from medical texts, like the famous Edwin Smith Papyrus. This document describes dozens of cases, diagnoses, and treatments in a clear, scientific way. It is a world away from magic and spells. The injured worker's arm would be examined carefully. The doctor would set the bone, aligning the two broken ends. A wooden splint would be applied to keep it in place. The wound would be cleaned and coated with honey. Honey was a common part of the Egyptian diet, but they also knew of its power to prevent infection. It is a natural antiseptic. Finally, the arm would be wrapped in clean linen bandages. This level of care is profound. It tells us that these workers were not slaves. They were valued assets, skilled professionals who were worth healing. They were worth the time and the resources to be mended and returned to the great work. Once a man was healed, or after a long day's work was done, he had a life beyond the pyramid. The city of Hayt el Gorab was not just a place of sleep and labor, it was a community. So what did 20,000 men do for leisure as the sun set over the desert? Let us imagine Nakao, his work finished for the day. He joins his gang, his aper, in the open space between the barracks. The air, now cool and pleasant, carries the scent of cooking fires. They share stories of their villages, of their families. They complain about a difficult foreman or boast about a perfectly cut stone. They share the last of their bread and perhaps trade for a piece of dried fish or some dates. They drink their beer, its thick, nourishing quality now a welcome comfort. Some of the men pull out a game board. It is the game of Senate, a game of passing, of moving across a grid of 30 squares. Nekao and his friends would gather around, watching the players throw casting sticks, like dice, to determine their moves. The game was more than just a pastime. It was a symbol of the journey to the afterlife, a race to move all your pieces off the board and into eternity. There would have been music, the simple notes of a reed flute or the steady beat of a drum. In a society where most people could not read or write, storytelling was everything. Stories of the gods, of great heroes, of the creation of the world. These tales would bind the men together, reinforcing their shared culture and beliefs. And as you lie here, listening, you join this ancient tradition of closing the day with a story. This city was not just barracks. Archaeologists have found larger, family-style houses for the permanent staff and officials. This suggests that some men lived here with their wives and children, creating a true, living community in the shadow of the great monument. This sense of community was powerful, but it was bound by something even stronger than shared work or evening games. It was bound by a profound, shared belief system. To understand why these men dedicated decades of their lives to this work, we must understand what the pyramid truly was. That was not just a tomb. It was a resurrection machine, a complex spiritual engine, a stairway to the heavens designed for one ultimate purpose: to ensure the pharaoh's rebirth and his ascension into the stars. The ancient Egyptians had a complex understanding of the soul. They believed each person had a Ka, a vital life force that was created at birth. And they had a Ba, which was closer to our idea of a personality or a soul. The Ba could travel outside the body after death. For a person to be reborn into the afterlife, their Ka and Ba needed to be reunited. The mummy preserved perfectly. In the tomb was the anchor for this reunion. The pyramid was the launch pad for the next part of the journey. Once reborn, the pharaoh would ascend from his chamber. He would travel to join the gods. He would become one with the circumpolar stars, the ones that never set below the horizon. They called them the imperishable ones. He would also join the sun god Ra on his daily journey across the sky in his solar boat. This was not just about one man's salvation. The pharaoh was the link between the gods and humanity. His successful transition to the afterlife upheld the entire cosmic order. It upheld the concept of Mat. Mat was truth, justice, harmony, and the fundamental order of the universe. If the king successfully became a god, then Mat was secure. The sun would continue to rise. The Nile would flood and nourish the land. The harvests would be plentiful. The world would remain in balance. And so, for Nekau and every other worker, building the pyramid was an act of profound self-interest. They were not just building a tomb for their king. They were ensuring the survival of their entire world. They were building a monument to cosmic order. This was the spiritual engine that drove them, a belief so powerful it could raise a mountain. Of stone dot, this grand spiritual vision required an equally grand intelligence to make it a physical reality. The pyramid project was not just an act of faith. It was a marvel of project management, guided by the most brilliant minds in the kingdom. Let us step into the administrative heart of the project dot here. in long shaded galleries, we find the scribes. They are the mind of the mountain. Dozens of them sit cross-legged, their papyrus scrolls or pottery shards resting on their laps. They meticulously track everything. With brushes made from reeds, they record the attendance of each gang. They note the distribution of rations, ensuring every worker receives his bread and beer. They keep detailed inventories of tools, tracking. Every copper chisel and every roll of rope dot, we know the incredible detail of their work because some of it has survived. A few years ago, a truly amazing discovery was made. Archaeologists found a logbook written on papyrus. It is called the Diary of Mirror. Mirror was an official who was in charge of a team of boatmen. His logbook, the oldest papyrus document ever found, records his daily work. He details his trips across the Nile to the quarries at Tura. He notes how they loaded the fine white casing stones onto their boat and delivered them to the Giza Plateau. He even recorded their diet. It is a stunning, direct window into the daily life of the project. Overseeing all of this was the master architect, the chief project manager. This was the vizier, the second most powerful man in Egypt. For the Great Pyramid, this was likely a man named Hemunu. We know what he looked like. His life-size statue was found in his tomb near the pyramid. It shows a man who is strong and intelligent. He is not a thin, whip-wielding tyrant. He is depicted as well-fed and confident. His face shows a calm, focused intelligence. This was the mind that directed the entire operation. He coordinated the supplies, the manpower, and the complex construction schedules, all without the aid of a single computer. The scribes used a cursive form of hieroglyphs called hieratic script. It was faster to write and perfect for the daily record-keeping that the project demanded. This administrative brilliance was the essential, unseen foundation of the pyramid. The project was powered by faith, but it was guided by reason and by the careful, methodical work of these ancient accountants and managers. The project, guided by this intelligence and powered by this belief, is now nearing its final, most delicate stage. The great work has gone on for nearly 20 years. Nakau is no longer a young man, new to the capital. He is a veteran, a master of his craft. He is now a foreman, respected by the men he leads. The pyramid is nearly complete. The work is now hundreds of feet in the air. Let us join him there, working amongst the gods. To work at this height is to live in the sky. The wind is a constant presence, pulling at their linen garments. The view is beyond anything they could have imagined. The entire world spreads out below them. The green ribbon of the Nile, the sprawling city of Memphis, and the endless expanse of the western desert. The noise of the worksite below is a distant murmur. Up here, there is a strange and focused peace, but the danger is immense. A single misstep, a moment of lost balance, would mean a fall of over 400 feet. The men move with a slow, deliberate grace, their bodies accustomed to the dizzying height. Nakau guides his team as they place the final casing stones. These are the smooth, white blocks of Tura limestone. The work now is slower and more meticulous than ever. Each stone must be set perfectly. The joints between them are so fine, less than a 50th of an inch, that you could not slide a piece of paper between them. They are creating a seamless, gleaming white surface, a perfect monument for their god king. The final height of the pyramid is staggering. It rises to 146 meters, or 481 feet. For over 3,800 years, it will remain the tallest man-made structure on Earth. The psychological challenge of working at this height, without nets or harnesses, is hard to fathom. It required a deep trust in one another and an unwavering focus on the task at hand. They were not just finishing a building. They were placing the skin on a living mountain. And now, only one piece remains. The most sacred part of the structure has been saved for last. It is the capstone, the pyramidion. In the ancient language, it is the benbenet. This is the small pyramid that will sit at the very apex of the great one. It is not just a stone. It is a symbol of the primordial mound, the first piece of land that rose from the waters of chaos at the dawn of creation. We can imagine it now. A special team has spent months carving it from a single block of granite. It has been sheathed in electrum, a shining alloy of gold and silver. It is ready. It begins its final journey, carefully pulled up the side of the pyramid on a specially constructed ramp. The work is agonizingly slow. Every man on the plateau stops to watch. A hush falls over the thousands of workers below. They gaze upwards as the shining stone ascends into the sky. When it reaches the top, an immense ceremony begins. Priests in their white robes chant hymns. The air is thick with the scent of incense. The benbenet is slowly, carefully lowered into place. As it settles onto the summit, it completes the pyramid. It effectively turns on the spiritual power of the entire structure. A great cheer erupts from the crowd below. A sound of 20 years of labor, of hope, of belief, all released in a single joyous roar. The capstone catches the light of the setting sun. It gleams like a star, a beacon connecting the earth to the heavens. Khufu's horizon is complete. With the great work finished, a massive celebration is held. The thousands of workers gather in the shadow of their creation. They receive a final bonus payment for their years of service. They are given fine linen cloth, pottery, and other valuable goods. The breweries and bakeries work overtime, providing a feast of bread and beer for all. It is a time of immense pride and relief. For Nekau, and for thousands of others, it is the end of a chapter. For 20 years, this project has been his entire life. The men in his gang are not just his crewmates. They are his brothers. He has worked with them, eaten with them, and shared his life with them. Now, it is time to say goodbye. The farewells are bittersweet. They clasp hands and promise to remember each other, though they know they will likely never meet again. Next morning, Nekau begins the long, quiet journey home. He travels south, back up the Nile. The Great Pyramid, his life's work, slowly shrinks behind him. It becomes a shining triangle on the horizon, before vanishing from view. He is a man, forever changed. He left his village as a simple stonemason. He returns as a veteran of the greatest project the world has ever seen. He carries with him the pride of his accomplishment and the memories of the community he helped to build in the years that followed. The worker city of Hayt el Gorab was slowly abandoned. Its streets fell silent, its barracks emptied. The desert winds began their patient work, burying the city under a blanket of sand. For millennia, it was lost, its story forgotten. All that remained was the silent, colossal monument it had served. But the pyramid itself endures. It stands today, a testament to Nekau and to the tens of thousands of skilled, motivated people who built it. As you drift now into a deep and peaceful sleep, let this be the final image in your mind. The story of the pyramid is not a story of suffering and whips. It is a story of human ingenuity. It is a story of cooperation, of project management, and of the incredible power of a shared belief that the gleaming white casing stones are mostly gone now, taken long ago to build new cities. They have revealed the weathered core blocks that we see today. But the pyramid's power to inspire wonder has not faded. It remains an echo on the sand, a silent reminder of a time when people came together to build a stairway to the stars. Let the silence of the desert and the majesty of this monument guide you now into a peaceful and restorative sleep. And so the pyramid stood, silent under the stars, a monument to a king, built by a nation, its purpose fulfilled. Its great stone heart had delivered its pharaoh to the eternal dance of the cosmos. It would seem that here our story ends. But it does not. The pyramid's first life, as a resurrection machine, was complete. But its second life, as a witness to history, was just beginning. Its story was far from over. So let us remain here, on the quiet sands of Giza. Let us not stir. Let the world you know fade away once more, and allow the gentle current of time to pull us forward. Let us watch as the centuries turn like pages in a book, and see what became of Khufu's great horizon dot for many years. The pyramid knew only peace. In its early life, it shone with a brilliant white light. Its polished Tura limestone casing reflected the sun with a dazzling intensity. Its golden capstone was a star, fallen to earth. It was not an abandoned relic. At its base, a bustling temple complex thrived. A dedicated community of priests served Khufu's mortuary cult. Every day, they performed the sacred rituals. They burned incense, recited hymns, and laid offerings of bread, beer, and meat before his statues. They were feeding his eternal soul, his Ka, ensuring his continued power in the afterlife. The pyramid was a living, breathing place of worship. For hundreds of years, this order was maintained. The great structure was inviolable, its secrets sealed behind tons of granite and limestone. The true entrance was hidden, plugged and plastered over, disappearing into the smooth white face of the north side. The treasures meant to sustain the king, and the king's body itself, were safe within its stone heart. The kingdom was stable, and the memory of the great builder was honored. The pyramid was a symbol of that stability, a perfect, unchanging mountain on the horizon. But no earthly order lasts forever. The old kingdom, the age of the pyramid builders, slowly crumbled. A series of weak rulers, combined with a changing climate and failing harvests, led to famine and civil unrest. The central authority of the pharaoh collapsed. The kingdom shattered into pieces, ruled by local warlords. This was the first intermediate period, a time of chaos and desperation. Faith in the old gods and in the divine kings began to waver. In a world of hunger and fear, the pyramids were no longer seen as sacred monuments. They were seen as treasure chests, waiting to be opened. And so, one night, a group of men came to the pyramid. They were not driven by faith, but by greed. They searched the north face, tapping along the stone, looking for the hidden entrance. When they could not find it, they began to dig. With copper chisels and brute force, they began to carve a new tunnel straight into the body of the monument. Imagine their state of mind, the immense fear of desecrating the tomb of a god, the stories of curses and the spirits of the dead. But their hunger was stronger than their fear. For days they worked in secret, their tunnel lit by smoking torches. The air was thick with limestone dust and stale with the scent of their sweat. Finally, with a resounding crack, they broke through into an existing corridor. They had found their way in. They moved carefully through the narrow passages. Their torches cast flickering, dancing shadows on the ancient walls. They passed the great granite plugs, bypassing the ancient security. They climbed the grand gallery, its high, corbelled ceiling disappearing into the darkness above them, a stairway to the heavens. They were in a place no living person had been for centuries. Their hearts pounded with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. At last, they reached the king's chamber. They stood in the very heart of the pyramid, a room lined entirely with red granite from Aswan. And there, in the center of the room, was their prize, the sarcophagus of the great pharaoh Khufu. With trembling hands and iron bars, they pried at the massive granite lid. It scraped open, the sound echoing in the profound silence of the chamber. They held their torches over the opening, their eyes wide with anticipation, and they saw nothing. The sarcophagus was empty. The treasure, the gold, the jewels, all of it was gone. Had it ever been there at all? Was the pyramid just a massive symbolic decoy? Had the priests removed the king's body to a safer location during the troubled times? Or had an earlier group of robbers, more cunning than themselves, already found a way in? No record remains. The chamber held its secrets. The pyramid kept its silence. This deep mystery would only grow when, nearly 2,000 years later, the Arab Caliph Al-Man would force his own entry, only to find the same thing. Empty chambers, a silent sarcophagus, and a profound sense of wonder. The centuries continued to flow. The chaos of the intermediate periods eventually gave way to a new era of strength and glory. This was the new kingdom. Egypt was now an empire, its borders stretching from Nubia to Syria. The capital was far to the south, in Thebes, and the new pharaohs, the great warrior kings, were buried in hidden tombs, cut deep into the rock of the Valley of the Kings. The Giza Plateau was no longer a royal cemetery. It was now a place of history, a relic from a bygone age. The great pyramids were ancient, even to the pharaohs of the new kingdom. They looked upon these monuments not as the tombs of rivals, but as the work of their revered ancestors. The plateau became a site of pilgrimage, a place to connect with the very foundations of their civilization. And it is here, in the shadow of the great monuments, that a new story unfolds. Let us meet a young prince named Thutmose. He is the son of the reigning pharaoh, Amenhotep II. Thutmose is young and strong and full of life. He loves to hunt in the desert, chasing gazelles in his chariot across the sands of the Juza Plateau. One day, after a successful hunt, the sun is high and hot. The prince, tired from his exertions, seeks a place to rest. He finds it in the shadow of a magnificent and ancient head. It is the head of the Great Sphinx, a monument even older than the pyramids themselves. For centuries, the desert sands have been encroaching upon it. Now, only its noble head and neck are visible above the dunes. The rest of its massive lion's body is buried deep beneath the sand. Thutmose finds a cool spot in its shadow, and he quickly falls asleep. And in his sleep, he has a dream. The great stone statue begins to stir. The ancient god Hormukit, who resides within the Sphinx, speaks to him. His voice is like the rumbling of the earth, deep and powerful. He speaks to the sleeping prince, telling him of his plight, buried and forgotten in the sand. And he makes the young prince a promise of a great destiny. The voice of the god Hormukit fills the prince's dreaming mind. He speaks of the endless wind and the creeping desert sand that smothers his body. He tells the prince to look upon his perfect form and to see how the sand chafes his stone skin. Then the god makes his divine offer. He looks upon the sleeping prince and says, "If you do this for me, if you free my body from this sand, then I shall give you the throne of the two lands. You will wear the white crown and the red crown. You will rule all of Egypt." The promise is immense. Thutmose was not the crown prince. He had older brothers who stood between him and the throne. But here, in this divine dream, he was being offered the ultimate prize. The prince awakens with a start. The sun is lower in the sky, and the air is cool. The dream is still vivid, the god's voice echoing in his memory. He looks up at the impassive stone face of the Sphinx and understands what he must do. Years later, when through the twists of fate and divine will, he does become Pharaoh Thutmose IV, he remembers his vow. He returns to Giza, not as a hunter, but as a king. He commands a great workforce to descend upon the plateau. Their task is to excavate the Sphinx. It is a massive undertaking. For months, thousands of workers dig and haul away the sand slowly, revealing the magnificent reclining body of the lion. For the first time in centuries, the Sphinx is whole again, a guardian watching over the ancient necropolis dot. To commemorate this great event and to legitimize his rule, Thutmose commissions a massive granite slab. It is carved with the story of his dream and of the god's great promise. He places this monument, the dreamed stele, directly between the paws of the Sphinx, where it remains to this day. His actions cement Giza's status. It is no longer just a cemetery. It is a place of living myth and of divine kingship. The river of time flows on. The great empire of the new kingdom fades. Egypt is ruled by Libyans, then by Nubians from the south, then by the armies of Persia. Finally, a new conqueror arrives, a young man from Macedonia named Alexander the Great. His arrival ushers in a new age, the Hellenistic period. The Greeks now rule Egypt, and they bring with them a new way of seeing the world. These new visitors are not worshippers. They are travelers, scholars, and soldiers. They look upon the pyramids not with religious reverence, but with profound curiosity and intellectual awe. They are driven by a desire to inquire, to measure, and to understand. One such visitor was a man from Halicarnassus named Herodotus. He traveled through Egypt around 450 BC, nearly 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid was completed. Herodotus spoke to the local priests and the guides, who were by now professional storytellers. He wrote down everything he heard. In his famous book, The Histories, He tells us that the pyramid was built by 100,000 men, working in 3-month shifts. He records that the builders lived on a diet of radishes, onions, and garlic, a detail he saw inscribed on the pyramid itself. He describes great machines, made of wooden planks, used to lift the stones from one level to the next dot. His stories are vivid, and for centuries, they were our only source of information. But they were tales, told 2 millennia after the fact. They were a mixture of faded memory and pure invention. As we now know, the workforce was much smaller, their diet was far better, and the methods they used were simpler and more ingenious than Herodotus imagined. His work shows us how quickly history can dissolve into legend, but the stories told by Herodotus and other travelers spread throughout the Greek-speaking world. The fame of the pyramids grew. Poets and scholars began to compile lists of the greatest and most impressive structures known to mankind. They called these lists the 7 wonders of the world. And at the very top of every list was the Great Pyramid of Giza. A Greek poet named Antipater of Sidon, writing in the 2nd century BC, summed up the feeling of his age. He wrote of the other wonders, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Great Statue of Zeus. He praised them all. But then he wrote, "When I saw the house of the pyramids that has been built up to the clouds, the others were put in the shadow. For him and for his world, the other wonders were works of men. But the pyramids seemed to touch the heavens. When Egypt finally fell under the rule of Rome, Giza's transformation was complete. It became one of the ancient world's premier tourist destinations. Roman governors, senators, and wealthy citizens would take the grand tour up the Nile. They would hire local guides to tell them the fantastic stories. They would marvel at the scale of the monuments, and like countless visitors after them, they would carve their names into the stones, leaving their own small mark on eternity. The pyramid was no longer just a pharaoh's tomb or a nation's icon. It had become a wonder belonging to the entire world. The Roman Empire, which had seemed as eternal as the pyramids themselves, began to fracture and fade. A new faith rose in its place, spreading with fervent speed across the deserts of Egypt. Christianity offered a different kind of eternity, and its followers looked upon the old monuments with new eyes. To the Coptic Christians of Egypt, the pyramids were no longer gateways to the heavens. They were relics of a pagan past, powerful and unsettling. The old gods were now seen as demons, and the pyramids were their dark, mysterious palaces. The mortuary temples at their base were abandoned. Their painted walls crumbled, and their stones were scavenged for new churches. The ancient language of hieroglyphs fell silent. The knowledge of the builders, the memory of their purpose, was lost. The Great Pyramid became a thing of myth once more, a silent, brooding mountain on the edge of the desert. Centuries later, another new faith arrived with the Arab conquest of the 7th century. The new rulers of Egypt were also captivated by the silent monuments. Legends swirled around them. They were said to be the storehouses of ancient wisdom, built by sorcerers before the Great Flood. They were rumored to hold unimaginable treasures. These legends drove the Caliph, Abdullah al-Ma'n, in the year 820, to make a determined effort to enter the Great Pyramid. He gathered a small army of engineers and laborers. When they could not find the hidden door, They lit great fires against the stone face, and then doused the hot rock with cold vinegar, cracking the blocks. They tunneled their way in, their passage a testament to immense effort. As we know, they found only empty chambers, but their rough-hewn tunnel, forever after known as the Robber's Tunnel, ironically became the main entrance for explorers and travelers for the next 1,000 years. The pyramid endured, a silent feature of the landscape. It watched as new cities rose and fell. It felt the heat of 1,000 summer suns and the cool of 1,000 winter nights. But its greatest transformation, the one that would give it the familiar face we know today, was yet to come. It would be delivered not by man, but by the earth itself. In the year 1303, a powerful earthquake shook the land of Egypt. The ground trembled, and great buildings in the bustling city of Cairo were felled. On the Giza Plateau, the quake shattered and loosened the Great Pyramid's magnificent white casing. For the first time in over 3,000 years, its gleaming, protective skin was broken. The pyramid, in its damaged state, now presented an opportunity. The Bahri Sultan, who ruled from Cairo, saw not a wounded monument, but the perfect quarry. He ordered his workers to strip the pyramid of its fallen casing stones. Block by brilliant white block, the Tura limestone was removed. It was loaded onto barges and ferried across the Nile. There, the very stones that Nechahu and his companions had so carefully placed were used to build the great mosques, the city walls, and the fortresses of medieval Cairo. If you visit Cairo today and look closely at its oldest buildings, you are looking at pieces of the Great Pyramid. It was a moment of profound loss. The pyramid was stripped of its glory, its perfect form undone. It became the jagged, step-like mountain we see now, but it was also a form of rebirth. Its skin became the foundation of a new great city. It was a silent, final gift to the people of Egypt. For centuries more, the pyramid remained an object of legend and speculation. Travelers came and went, each with a new theory about its origins and purpose. But the age of reason was dawning in Europe, and with it came a man who would change the destiny of Egypt forever. In 1798, a French general named Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt. He brought with him not only soldiers and cannons, but also a private army of a different kind. He brought 167 scholars. They were France's leading engineers, artists, naturalists, and historians. They were known as the savants. While Napoleon fought his battles, his savants began the first modern, scientific study of Egypt. They descended upon the Giza Plateau with measuring tapes and survey equipment. They documented everything. They created the first truly accurate architectural drawings of the pyramid, measuring its angles, its height, its every passage and chamber. They drew the art and carefully copied the hieroglyphs from the surrounding tombs. Their work was a monumental effort to capture and understand a lost world through the lens of science, not superstition. This great undertaking produced a multi-volume masterpiece, the Description de l'Egypte, which revealed the wonders of ancient Egypt to Europe in breathtaking detail. During this same campaign, Napoleon's soldiers, while digging foundations for a fort, uncovered a broken stone slab. It was inscribed with 3 different scripts: Greek, an everyday Egyptian script, and the mysterious hieroglyphs. This stone, the Rosetta Stone, would prove to be the key. It would allow scholars, after years of work, to finally decipher the ancient language. For the first time in 1500 years, the stones of Egypt could speak for themselves. This breakthrough unlocked a new age of discovery. The 19th century saw the birth of modern Egyptology. A new kind of explorer came to Giza, armed with knowledge and scientific purpose. Men like the great British archaeologist Flinders Petrie. He spent years living in a tomb on the plateau, conducting the most precise survey of the pyramid ever attempted. He marveled at its near-perfect orientation to the cardinal points and at the incredible precision of its construction. He moved beyond the legends and began to formulate the theories about ramps and labor and logistics that form the basis of our understanding today. The pyramid was no longer just a wonder. It was becoming a historical document. And so, we find ourselves at the end of our long journey. The pyramid has lived more lives than the pharaoh it was built for. It has been a sacred temple, a treasure, chests to be plundered, a pagan demon, a convenient quarry, a tourist attraction, a scientific puzzle, and a global icon. It has watched as its own civilization turned to dust. It has seen the arrival of Greeks, Romans, Christians, Muslims, and the great armies of the modern age. It has outlasted them all. Let your mind drift back one last time to Nakau, the stonemason. His name is forgotten. The city he lived in has vanished beneath the sand. But his work, the collective work of thousands of people with a shared purpose, remains. It is a silent witness, a tangible link between our world and the very dawn of human ambition. It stands solid and eternal under the same stars that guided him home. And there, on the quiet sands of the Giza Plateau, we shall leave it to continue its endless, silent watch. Let the peace of the desert and the weight of the centuries now guide you into a deep and final rest. The birth of science and the dawn of archaeology began to illuminate the Great Pyramid with the clear, bright light of reason. The work of the savants and the decipherment of the hieroglyphs started a process of discovery that continues to this day. But the light of science did not banish the shadows of mystery. In many ways, it only made them deeper. As the world learned how the pyramid might have been built, a powerful new desire arose. A desire to understand a deeper, hidden why. This impulse would create a new pyramid, an invisible one, built not of stone, but of pure theory. And so our journey continues into the strange and winding passages of the human imagination, as it has grappled with the pyramid's profound silence. For much of the medieval era, travelers from Europe who saw the pyramids had only one book. To guide their understanding, the Bible, they looked upon the colossal structures on the horizon and searched for a familiar story. They found one in the book of Genesis. These, they concluded, must be the granaries of Joseph. They were the storehouses built by the Israelite patriarch to hold the grain during the 7 years of plenty, in anticipation of the 7 years of famine. This idea made perfect sense in a world that had long forgotten the name Khufu. It gave the mysterious mountains a purpose It was both practical and pious. A story was told by pilgrims returning from the Holy Land, and for centuries, it was the accepted truth dot as the Renaissance dawned in Europe. A new wave of interest in ancient and mystical texts swept across the continent. Scholars rediscovered the writings of Greek philosophers and an enigmatic figure named Hermes Trismegistus. He was said to be an ancient Egyptian sage, a master of alchemy, astronomy, and magic. A new theory began to form. The pyramid was not a simple granary. It was a temple of initiation, a library of sacred knowledge, a hall of the great Hermes himself. Secret societies, like the Rosicrucians, saw in its dimensions the encoding of sacred geometry, the secrets of the universe expressed in the language of pure mathematics. The pyramid, they believed, was a silent teacher, waiting for a worthy student to come and unlock its secrets. This mystical view of the pyramid as a repository of lost wisdom would echo for centuries. But as the age of enlightenment gave way to the age of industry, this old mysticism would merge with the new authority of science, creating a strange and powerful new idea. It began with a London publisher named John Taylor. In the mid-19th century, without ever having set foot in Egypt, he became obsessed with the measurements of the Great Pyramid. He studied every survey he could find. He concluded that the mathematical properties encoded in the structure, such as the relationship between its height and perimeter, were far too advanced for the ancient Egyptians. Taylor argued that the pyramid must have been built by a non-Egyptian, someone guided by divine wisdom. Perhaps it was Noah from the Bible, or another patriarch. He proposed that the builders had used a sacred unit of measurement, which he called the pyramid inch, a unit just slightly longer than a British inch. This, he claimed, was a divine unit, and with it, the builders had recorded the very measurements of the earth itself. Taylor's ideas were intriguing, but they came from an amateur. The man who would elevate them into a global phenomenon was one of the most respected scientists of his day. His name was Charles Piazzi Smyth. He was the Astronomer Royal for Scotland, a man of immense learning and devout Christian faith. He was captivated by John Taylor's theories. He believed that if the pyramid truly was a divine message, then it deserved the most rigorous scientific investigation. And so, in 1865, Piazzi Smyth traveled to Egypt. He set up his home inside an empty tomb on the Giza Plateau. For months, he and his wife endured the blistering heat, the choking dust, and swarms of bats, all to conduct the most exacting survey of the pyramid ever attempted. He measured everything: the length of the corridors, the height of the chambers, the size of the stones, and the volume of the granite sarcophagus. When he returned to Scotland and analyzed his data, he produced a theory that was breathtaking. In its scope, he declared that the Great Pyramid was a Bible in stone. He agreed that it was built using the sacred pyramid inch, and that it contained a prophetic timeline of all human history. The long passages, he claimed, were a map of time. By measuring the distance along the floor in pyramid inches, one could mark the dates of every major event in the biblical story. He identified points that he said corresponded to the creation of Adam, the exodus of the Israelites, and the birth of Christ, his theory did not stop in the past. It continued into the future. The passages, he claimed, foretold events yet to come, culminating in the second coming and the final judgment. Piazzi Smythe published his findings in a series of books that became international bestsellers. 4. Millions of people in the Victorian era. This was the ultimate fusion of science and faith. It was scientific proof of the divine plan for humanity. The Great Pyramid was not a pagan tomb. It was a message from God. A massive popular movement, known as pyramidology, was born. It had millions of followers, all of whom saw Giza not as a place of archaeology, but of prophecy. The scientific community, however, was not convinced. The great Flinders Petrie, whose own survey was far more accurate, systematically dismantled Piazzi Smythe's work. He showed that Smythe's measurements were often selective, and that the theory only worked if you chose which numbers to use. But the mystical impulse, the desire for the pyramid to be something more than human, did not go away. It simply evolved in the late 20th century. A new and compelling theory emerged, one that once again linked the pyramid to the heavens. It was called the Orion correlation theory, proposed by the author Robert Bauval. He argued that the layout of the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau was not random. He proposed that it was a deliberate, earthly map of the three stars in the belt of the constellation Orion. Furthermore, he argued that the alignment was most precise not in 2500 BC, when the pyramids were built, but thousands of years earlier, around 10,500 B.C. This theory was powerful. It seemed to connect the physical evidence on the ground with the core of Egyptian religion. The deceased pharaoh was said to ascend to the heavens and become one with the star god Osiris, who was identified with the constellation of Orion. The pyramids, in this view, were a monumental machine designed to facilitate the stellar rebirth. The theory sparked a fierce debate among Egyptologists. While many acknowledged the visual appeal of the correlation, they pointed out that there is absolutely no other archaeological evidence of any major construction at Giza in 10,500 BC. The debate continues, a modern echo of the clash between intuitive belief and physical fact. And this brings us to the present day. The pyramid's power to inspire wonder and to attract strange new ideas is as strong as ever. In our own age, the divine builders of the 19th century have been replaced by a new kind of architect, ancient astronauts. Theories of extraterrestrial intervention are now a common feature of popular culture. These ideas, while presented in a modern technological guise, are fueled by the very same impulse that drove Piazzi Smythe. It is the belief that the Great Pyramid is simply too perfect, too massive, too mysterious, to be the work of mere humans. But here, at the end of our very long journey, we can finally let these theories rest. For the true secret of the Great Pyramid is not to be found in the stars, nor in the pages of a prophetic book. The secret lies in the very human story we began with. The true wonder is not that gods, or aliens, or prophets built the pyramid. The true and lasting miracle of Giza is that people did. It was built by men like Nakao, tens of thousands of skilled, organized, and motivated human beings who gathered on this plateau with a shared purpose. They used simple tools, brilliant logistics, and an unshakable belief to build an eternal mountain. Their achievement needs no further mystery. It is, in and of itself, the greatest wonder of all.